What would you do if you were sitting at home and you heard that beeping noise that your smoke detector makes when the battery is getting low? If you're anything like me, you would stubbornly ignore it for at least a week, if not closer to a month, until it really got to you, and then you'd finally find a way to get those batteries changed by your own work or the help of someone else. What would you do if you were at home and you thought you smelled smoke? You'd probably decide you should figure out where that's coming from, if it's anything serious. Depending on how intense the smell was, you might or might not watch the end of the football play. I might do that. But you would pretty quickly figure out what was going on. Was there actually some sort of fire? Was it just the neighbors having some sort of barbecue? But you'd act on it pretty quickly and make sure you dealt with it if there was anything happening. What would you do if the smoke detector, instead of having that battery beep, actually went on alarm? Or you actually saw flames? Or you actually heard someone in your home yell fire? You'd probably get yourself and your loved ones, some of us would probably grab our fur babies too, get out of there, call 911, right? It's a full-on existential crisis. It's an emergency. House on fire. What are you gonna do? You're gonna act right away. You might feel some panic, but you're gonna act constructively right away. Back in the 1980s, the early people who talked about what we then called global warming, they were sort of like that low battery warning on the smoke detector, right? Do you remember this? Do you remember back when people like then Senator Al Gore was called derisively Ozone Man? Do you remember when most folks, really, even most Unitarian Universalists, didn't really necessarily think that global warming was true, or even if it were true, you weren't so sure that humans had much, if anything, to do with it? I remember that. For me, those early warnings were like the smoke detector beeping at best. It was slightly annoying. I basically ignored it. Back in the 80s, the Cold War and the threat of thermonuclear war seemed a whole lot more pressing and scary than this global warming nonsense. For me personally, it wasn't until sometime in the mid-90s that I, to use the analogy, put new batteries in the global warming smoke detector. By then I was a young adult. I started to think that global warming probably was real, since so many smart people seem to be believing in it. I also believed similarly that humans probably had something to do with it, so I made some changes in my lifestyle. I vowed that I would drive small, fuel-efficient cars, and I have ever since. I vowed that I would stop eating meat, since I knew that that had something to do with the global warming mix. And then actually that's probably about it. And then that sort of annoying, nagging thing went away. Felt like I was kind of doing my part. By the early 2000s, or aughts, or whatever we call them, I believed that there was, in fact, smoke. I wasn't really noticing it myself, but scientists and people that I respected were telling me there was definitely smoke. And so I got a little more serious. I got onto the board of UU Ministry for Earth. I started working for Interfaith Power and Light, doing things related to climate change, which became the new preferred term instead of global warming. But if I'm honest, even in spite of that, I didn't really feel that much urgency. It just felt like one cause among many, and it seemed like the right thing to do, to get people and houses of worship to be conserving energy, to be thinking about renewables or alternative energy sources other than burning fossil fuels. It seemed to make sense to recycle and the rest. But now, well into the 2010s, we're practically at 2020. Perhaps you've heard the name Greta Thunberg in the news lately. Thunberg is that 16-year-old activist from Sweden who is now in New York City. She's in New York so that she can address the United Nations coming up very soon. This is what she recently said to world leaders. Our house is on fire. We're facing a disaster of unspoken sufferings for enormous amounts of people. And now is not the time for speaking politely or focusing on what we can or cannot say. Now is the time to speak clearly, she went on. You say nothing in life is black and white, but that's a lie, a very dangerous lie. Either we prevent 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming or we don't. Either we avoid setting off that irreversible chain reaction beyond human control, or we don't. Either we choose to go on as a civilization, or we don't. That is as black and white as it gets. There are no gray areas when it comes to survival. She said, adults keep saying, we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And I want you to act. I want you to act like your house is on fire, because it is. Thunberg is absolutely correct. Our house is on fire. It is the time to act with extreme urgency. The time left to fix the global climate crisis, the time left to avoid irreversible catastrophe is growing short. You might have heard the estimate that we have about 12 years left to avoid catastrophe. That number, 12 years, was what the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, announced last year, which means they're about 11 years now. The IPCC stated that in the next 12 or now 11 years, we need to make major and dramatic steps worldwide to keep global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Or as Thunberg told us, the catastrophe will be in full motion with no turning back. So it's really kind of curious. Why aren't we acting like our house is on fire? I think we believe it is. How strange that we're doing so little. Part of it is, unlike with the smoke detector analogy, you can't really just grab your family and run out of the house. There's no running out of this home. It's the earth home. There is no option other than putting out the fire ourselves. So why aren't we working harder to do that? Is it because for those of us who are getting older, perhaps have some privilege, and I include myself in that category, is it because we will be ourselves minimally impacted by the climate catastrophe in our lifetimes? Younger people on this planet need to see that we care. They know the house is on fire. It's been on fire their entire lifetimes, and they don't have a lifetime of ignorance or a lifetime of denial behind them. They know. And they see us doing so little, seemingly caring so little. The younger generations have already expressed that they don't want thoughts and prayers of adults, whether it's the issues of guns or whether it's this global climate catastrophe. They want action. And honestly, they need to see that we care about something other than ourselves. They need to see that we care about their futures as much as we care about our own. There really is no time to move cautiously. And people of faith are, of course, called to be prophetic. And Unitarian Universalists, with our seventh principle, caring about the interdependent web of all existence, our first principle, caring about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, this crosses over into everything. It crosses over into all of our principles, in part because people with little wealth and people of color are disproportionately impacted by all of this. We already see an increase of hurricanes of great proportions, and so the Bahamas is one of many examples of how this is playing out already. It's not even like the catastrophe is in the future. It feels that way to those of us who are perhaps privileged in this moment, but it's already happening right now. It's environmental injustice. I think we are called at a minimum to start by participating in the upcoming youth-led global climate strike. From September 20th, it's coming Friday, through that week until the 27th, youth like Thunberg are leading a worldwide climate strike, demanding real and transformative action be taken to address climate change. Unitarian Universalists are getting involved all over the country, along with other faith groups and secular organizations. The Unitarian Universalist Association, along with groups like UU Ministry for Earth and Side with Love, along here in this state with UU Mass Action, have all joined as partners with the global climate strike. So what can we do? UU Mass Action is hoping that Unitarian Universalists from all 140 congregations in the state will send some folks to the climate strike this coming Friday, which is in Boston at the State House. I'm going to be going. We can carpool, we could take the train. As many people as can come, the better. I know some people will work on Friday, but this is, after all, a strike. Youth are actually planning, many of them, to strike and leave classes. And it would mean the world to them if some of us could choose to leave work that day and strike. So we can at least support them. If you can't yourself strike that Friday, you've got too much at work to get out of work, perhaps you could do a climate strike at your lunch break. And then use social media with the hashtag climate strike. Because this first action is symbolic, but it's to let the youth know that we hear them, that we feel the urgency, and that we are with them. So it's still important, though symbolic. We can also support the youth who strike, maybe help them with transportation, make them snacks, help them stay out of trouble if anyone from their school district gives them trouble, right? We can support them all the way with this. We are the ones who have to demand real and transformative action on the climate from politicians at all levels after that. We can make individual changes too. We can make changes here as a congregation. But this requires huge action, so we also have to do that piece. And we will be focusing on this more this year. Here at FCU, you can get involved in the newly forming Environmental Action Group. They're having a meeting this coming Tuesday. They're just getting started up. So Tuesday at 7, check it out. You can support the work of our Green Sanctuary Task Force as they continue to do the good work, making our own spaces and practices more ecologically sound. There's a lot to do, and we really kind of need to do all of it. We're the only ones who can make this happen. Yes, carbon dioxide levels are rising. Yes, the tide is rising. But we can rise too, right? What can we do together?
Rise.
Really, what can we do together?
Rise.
That's right. Please, let us rise. The youth need to see it, that we love them, that we do what our values call us to do. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.